Hello, I'm John Featherston, the CEO of RAS Media. Welcome to a special RAS Media Premier webinar, Compensation and Commission Strategies post the NAR mandate. This is an extremely important week in our industry. The changes mandated by the lawsuit settlements must be incorporated into your operations now. Our goal is to help our readers successfully integrate these changes into their businesses to help equip you and meet the challenges we now face, as well as leverage the incredible opportunities that lie ahead of us as a result of the new rules and regulations. This hour together, I believe, will help many of you better understand how to succeed with the new rules and regulations we face. Our industry has changed, and to succeed going forward, we all need to evolve and improve. To help you address and overcome these challenges, I have asked four of our industry's most dynamic thought leaders, and I mean that. These are dynamic thought leaders, experts who have spent an incredible amount of time preparing for what we're all facing right now. They are all highly respected and willing to share their positions and have an open discussion with you, our premier subscribers. The time is now to make sure you and your sales associates are minimizing risks, improving your respective positions, and understanding how to best go forward. Today's lively discussion will be thought-provoking, and hopefully it'll help you better navigate your way through the new normal the right way. Over the course of the next hour, we'll be doing our best to discuss as many aspects of compensation and commission strategies in this post-NAR mandate time that we possibly can. Our panel will discuss how to operate now with what they're teaching and are planning to teach their agents over the next several days, and continuing to teach and prepare their agents and their managers to operate successfully in this new environment, including but not limited to how to make sure you're not breaching your fiduciary responsibility and how to handle unrepresented buyers, as well as many other topics. You may hear several opinions on what many organizations are recommending that our thought leaders may think are fundamentally wrong. Listen and learn. This is an exciting, open exchange, and I believe you'll find it extremely valuable. To get started, it's my pleasure to introduce my distinguished guests, thought leaders who are all helping move our industry forward. First, it's my honor to welcome Leo Perea, the CEO of eXp Realty, representing more than 80,000 sales associates worldwide, 73,000 of which operate within the United States. Michelle Harrington, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran and the CEO of First Team Real Estate, the largest privately owned brokerage firm in Southern California with more than 2,000 sales associates. James Dwiggins, the co-founder and dynamic CEO of Next Home, which now has more than 630 franchisees, along with approximately 6,000 sales associates working in their brand. Rounding out our esteemed panel is another incredible brokerage owner, my good friend Anthony Lamacchia, the founder and CEO of Lamacchia Realty, with more than 700 sales associates operating throughout New England and Florida. Anthony also operates, which many of you know, the appropriately named training and education company, Crush It in Real Estate. Welcome, panel. And now let's get started. You're all incredibly engaged, not just with your own organizations, but in the regional and national industry on the stage and dealing with this subject matter at hand. Let's get started. Anthony, I'm going to turn to you first. From your perspective, how have you prepared your organization for this new normal that we're facing right now this week?
Well, thank you, John. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. And we're certainly in a very interesting time. And when you ask how I'm going about preparing my organization, a lot of the training that I've been doing over the last few months, or really since last October when we realized the case was going to go the wrong way, a lot of it I've been doing since 2012, both at my company and nationally through Crush It in Real Estate since 2015. The idea of having to speak openly with buyers and sellers about compensation and speak transparently and tell them what they are going to have to pay through the transaction is not something new to me. And it's certainly not something new to the agents that have been with me a long time. What I find super interesting in the recent months is how, we're in a situation where this settlement is coming up over the next week. Some states like New Hampshire, where we operate, have already kicked it into gear as of July 15th. But what's interesting is the folks that are out there actually speaking out, the ones that are here on this screen, are seeming to get some flack. But just last week, I was at a local real estate event, and about 4 different broker owners came up to me and said, "Hey, just so you know, we're doing it the same way you are. We just don't go on camera and talk about it." And I said, "Thank you very much." So it's kind of funny how some are misunderstanding some of what we're talking about. I noticed that, James and I were probably or Leo. I don't even know who was first, and we probably should figure it out. But one of us, we had mentioned that, hey, we're not participating in broker-to-broker compensation. So there's a percentage of people that heard that and misunderstood. And then there's, I think, a much larger percentage of people who did understand, but said, Lamakia doesn't want to pay co-brokes. Lamakia thinks buyer agents and buyer brokerages shouldn't get paid, and twisted it into things that were never said. So, it's been interesting to see. It's been a lively few weeks in the media. And I know when you and I were talking about it a couple of weeks ago, John, you had this idea. You said, hey, how about we get you all in a webinar and we can talk about this? And that's why we're here today. So I appreciate that. But that's a little bit of my thoughts as to what I see. And I'm happy to elaborate it more, but I want to share the mic with the others.
Thanks, Anthony. Leo, from your perspective, running a global organization and a large high-tech domestic organization, what's your perspective?
Yeah, so we were forced into the forms business not by choice, right? I would say about a month ago, I said to my operations team, and a good percentage of the states we operate had no new forms, and some of the other ones had rolled out forms that we transparently thought were problematic and confusing, right? Our interpretation of the NAR settlement, plus the very clear talking points, i.e. cease and desist issued by the DOJ, and then coupled with the last part of this being what MLSs are going to enforce and how, we just didn't want any ambiguity, right? We, to Anthony's point, I'm pretty sure you were the first to say it, but I feel like I was the first one to get publicly beat for it. More broker-to-broker compensation. That does not mean seller-to-broker compensation is not available. And again, as Anthony very well put it, it was a very loud couple of weeks, and I've had an equal amount of, as I was walking off stage at Inman with James, I got a couple hugs from people said, "Thank you for taking the arrows, but we're doing it too." I know of several largest independents in certain states who updated their forms last week and are not going on the microphone, and I respect that. But we just didn't have a choice, right? We're a national organization that had to do something. I mean, there are states. There was a state last week where the licensing board was arguing with the association publicly, like sending out emails saying don't use those forms after they had put out forms and trained. So we just couldn't be in a position where we could allow our agents to have that level of ambiguity. And I think the most important kind of headline that we received last week was the Kansas City Association of Realtors, which is the local association where the case was tried and settled, understands where the industry is going in addition to all the other legal scrutiny from the DOJ, and has chosen to remove the broker-to-broker compensation from their listing agreement, right? So they're not telling you how to do your business, but they've added to the form where you can negotiate concessions right in the purchase contract. And ABOR in Austin has had a very similar position where their listing agreements are now reflective of it. So,
to be clear, Leo, this just happened last week.
Yeah. Well, Kansas was last week. Austin was probably a month ago. Amy has been all over it and kind of a leader in the space. But I just hung up doing an interview for Market Watch. I've talked to CNN, Time, Associated Press, Wall Street Journal all in the last 7 days. And the consumers are going to hear this, right? So like when the agents are putting their head in the sand and say, well, why do we change this? It's because it's happening, whether they want it or not. and consumers are going to be very well versed in what their choices are, and that's where I'm kind of focused on. And I'll pause there and let somebody else jump in, because I know the four of us are quite animated about the subject right now.
Well, thanks, but we will get back to you, and we want to know more about how you're educating your agents about the choices that their consumers have. Michelle, you're located in Southern California. Again, you're one of the largest organizations in Southern California. Tell us about your position. What are you doing, and what effect is that having on your company right now?
Yeah, well, the one thing is I don't want to forget like how we got here. And I think we need to keep talking about how we got here. I think we need to keep talking about the federal government, the DOJ, getting involved in private transactions between private individuals, which is wrong. These lawsuits, which is unjust. And not talking about it because we're whining about it, but talking about it because we need to keep shedding light on it, or it's not going to be the first time. It's not going to be the first set of class actions. And I think we need to make sure we remember how we got here. And then the other thing about like how we run our company and how our forms are coming out, I very much listen to my agents. My agents are all very professional business owners. They know more about selling real estate than I know about selling real estate, because I'm sitting here and, you know, I'm the CEO spot. I listen to them and ask them, how do you think we should do this? What do you think we need to do to make sure that we're covering you, that we're covering the buyers, that we're covering the sellers? We relied so long on NAR and CAR to come out with the best forms, the best, you know, way to run our business, and they just really dropped the ball. I mean, NAR obviously dropped the ball with not fighting this, and I can't even tell you how upsetting that is. I've been a huge fan of the associations for so long, and I've been a director for both of them. But they really dropped the ball on this, not fighting it. And then CAR comes out with their listing contract with no compensation, no any way to pay a buyer's agent, either through the seller or through a co-broke or through concessions or anything. There's nothing in there. So we're stuck 2 weeks ago with having to generate our own forms and create our own forms, which is terrible. And it's really putting, I think, NAR and CAR, like, why do we need them? You know, we can't have a promise to pay in the MLS. They're not coming out with forms that help protect us and help run our business. So I think there's so much going on, John.
Yeah.
That I'm definitely going to let everybody else speak. But you know, we are doing our form that we came out with is seller directly paying a buyer's agent. It just seemed like the most simple way we could have it, but you know, we were stuck with like 2 weeks and having to create this whole new environment for ourselves, and that's even though it's terrible, I think our agents really showed us the way and how they want to run their business, and we took their lead.
Well, Michelle, thank you. You're not alone as a large brokerage firm that listens to their agents and listens to their needs. And we're displeased with the direction that you were getting from your association. So you created your own forms that gives the opportunity of your agents to work in compliance with the new normal and their fiduciary responsibility to their client. But also, you provided them with the ammunition to go forward to operate their business starting on the 17th and before. So with that, let me go to James. James, you just heard a little bit from your colleagues. Tell us your perspective and where you think we are both as an industry and where your organization is going forward. And what are the challenges that are still ahead of us, and what are the opportunities?
Well, thank you for having me, John. Yeah, I mean, I'm in line with several of my colleagues. Michelle and I might be slightly different on a few things, but that's okay. We're all running independent businesses. Look, I think the industry has to let go of the past. I don't believe that You know, I think NAR, we could argue whether they fumbled it or not. The reality was at the rate it was going, NAR would be bankrupted. And just to be clear, I think NAR has an extraordinarily important purpose in DC to make sure that everybody on this line is actually employed. Without advocacy, and we would not actually have this industry. But all that being said, you know, look, we're continuing to do behavior that got us to here to begin with. So if we use standardized forms created by a committee of competing brokers that are promoting cooperative compensation, that is almost identical to the case that we just lost and had a $1.7 billion judgment against. So I personally have been very vocal about the fact that associations should all not do cooperative compensations in their forms, which is why several of the colleagues here are all producing their own forms as well, because we don't want to take on that risk. A few of us here in the $2 billion club, and we know what the cost is to litigate that. I'm not interested in taking that expense on again. And we have to be thinking about where things are going and stop living in the past. And I'm sick and tired of hearing people going, well, how am I going to get paid? We're not saying, nobody here is saying, to be clear, that the seller isn't willing to offer compensation. All we're saying is we don't want you to collect and remit, as Anthony did with his stick figures video, which I thought was really clever, and remit payment to the buyer broker. We're just simply saying remove that liability, have the seller pay the buyer broker directly. This is not complex. I don't understand how hard it's for everybody to get. Instead of collecting and remitting, we're just redirecting the funds. That's it. That's all this is about. Nobody should be using forms that are standardized, created by competing brokers to share commissions, or we're all going to end up in antitrust litigation again. I know this because I have 2 antitrust firms defending the case currently, and they're like, don't do that. That is really, really stupid, and there's no reason to do it. So every single association in the United States, to be clear, the ones that haven't done this will all do it. It's simply a matter of time, because the reality is, as Leo mentioned, almost all the major brokerages are already enacting these policies. They're just not saying anything. And I'll add one other comment. If you're a listing agent and you're going to go meet with a seller and you're going to say, this is my fee, and we're going to either advertise or not, which I'll get to in a minute, cooperative compensation, right? And then you have listing agent B come doing the traditional way where you're now maybe double or triple, whatever the number is, and you're collecting and remitting. All the seller heard was one agent was half the cost of the other agent. You're going to lose every single listing presentation you go up against. So every brokerage that's continuing to do this, I give it 6 months, and you'll be not doing this process any further, and you'll be doing the same thing everybody else is doing, which is a smart move of moving away from that practice and allowing this to be something where you're removing yourself from the middle ground of that and just having the seller pay direct. So my take is that, and we'll come do a lot more stuff and I'll stop talking, but I think everybody needs to wake up to the fact that this one final comment, nobody on this webinar, no one, not even Leo and how big EXP is, we can't afford all of this litigation. It's just in a judgment that is beyond anything that anyone can pay, proven by the why NAR had to settle the case. So unless everybody wants to deal with further litigation down the line, make a smart decision now and just reroute how everybody's paid, and you've solved that issue.
Yeah, James, very, very well said. Let's go to Anthony. I know your hand is up on it.
Yeah, thanks, John. I want to clarify a couple things. I appreciate all the comments that they all made, but I think I have figured out where some of the confusion is coming from, and I want to just spend a couple of minutes on it. What a lot of brokers and agents are saying to me when they ask, some of the comments they're making is, well, NAR doesn't say we have to do that. And I think what's happening is a lot of people in the industry are misunderstanding. So NAR, just like James just said, had to settle with the plaintiffs and the plaintiffs' counsel to lessen their loss. And during that settlement, like in any settlement, they did all they could to negotiate the least restrictive terms possible. So of course they didn't, they tried not to agree to limit broker-to-broker compensation. There's many other things that the plaintiff's attorneys wanted to restrict as well. And NAR did all they could, as any good defendant would do, to lessen the amount of restrictions. Just because myself, James, Leo, and some other companies have come out and said, hey, you know what? We're going to go a step further than what the NAR settlement calls for. Doesn't necessarily mean that we think NAR is wrong or NAR somehow did a horrible job. We all have our opinions. Michelle spoke some of her negative opinions with them I agreed with. Some I was like, well, I'm not so sure it was that way, but that's okay. We're all entitled to our own opinions. What I want the broker public to understand is NAR negotiated the least restrictive settlement possible, just because myself with my lawyers, both in-house and outside counsel, and Leo and James and Michelle and whoever else, which is many, decided, you know what? We're going to follow the settlement, but we're actually going to take it one step a little further. We're just going to say, in our organization, we don't want to be promoting and offering out broker-to-broker compensation, meaning brokerage to brokerage, meaning Lamakia Realty to EXP or whoever else. But instead, if the seller wants to offer it, wonderful, right? Seller can pay it. The same when we're representing a buyer. We're representing a buyer, and if there's a situation where another brokerage is offering our brokerage compensation, we're going to say, thank you very much, but no thank you. But we will accept it from seller, and we want X from seller, right? That doesn't mean that we're criticizing NAR or we think anybody screwed up. It simply means the way that we're doing business is the way that we feel the safest. And it also doesn't mean we agree. There's been people out that have said, oh, Lamakia agrees now. He agrees that there was a case. No, I don't. I have said more vocally than anyone that I thought the whole case was a scam. I thought it was wrong. I think the jury came down the wrong way. But just because I feel that way doesn't mean that I'm not going to work to protect my company.
John, real quick.
Go ahead,
Just because I want people to hear what Anthony said was really, really important. Not only was the brokerage not, sharing, he's also not receiving it that way either.
Not accepting.
Everybody's getting this like half right. It's like, well, we're not sharing. It's like, okay, well, if you want to avoid potential litigation, you can't receive it that way either. You need to make sure that your buyer's agents are collecting that through the closing process. I just want to make sure that.
If I could, James and Anthony, let's be perfectly clear. And Leo, please step in, and Michelle. We have thousands of people watching this today. Want to be perfectly clear that broker to brokerage compensation is yesterday's news. Okay, we can't do that. What Anthony and what James are just illustrating is the new normal and how to grow forward. One thing that hasn't changed is the vast majority of home sellers are seeking to obtain the highest possible closing price and net proceeds for their home. And if they think that we are the conduit to do that, they're going to turn to us. They want transparency and they want honesty, correct? They also, if you're the buyer, you want transparency and honesty too. We want to give them that transparency. Let's talk a little bit about how you're advising a potential buyer that is unaffiliated. How are you instructing your agents to talk to a buyer that is unaffiliated right now? Anthony?
Well, John, if you want me. So I think that we've always have been a proponent of buyer broker agreements. We've been teaching buyer broker agreements for the last 40 years. So our agents are very equipped with it. They know it. We definitely, that's one of the only good things that actually come out of this is that buyer broker agreements are now going to be the norm. So a buyer knows what their deal is with their agent, what they're paying in commission, how they're represented. When you're a brand new buyer, you don't understand any of that. Nobody really explains it to you. So I love that part of this. I think that's one of the good things that came out of this is that buyers will know how they're being represented, and they will have an agreement just like they always should have had, just like a seller has with the listing agent. And I think that's great. And training your buyer's agents on how to make sure they can show their value, they can have a great agreement, they can have a great presentation is going to be better for the industry. So I like, on the positive note, I love that part of all this. Everything else, I'm not a big fan.
Well,
Michelle,
she's
let
com-
me
she's
get
com-
this. Let me ask a question a little deeper. You've been a big proponent, I know, of buyer agency. Okay. However, we need to be, in my humble opinion, articulating in much greater detail the value that our agents are providing buyers, and illustrating to a relatively unsophisticated client what it is you're doing, we do for them. The negotiating skill sets we bring to the opportunity, those alone are extremely valuable. So and so and further down the list, we've never had to put a figure to those services, and it's extremely important that we do that professionally and articulate that to the highest degree going forward. James, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I mean, look, our industry is wholly unprepared for this because we haven't had to do it for a long time. Now, to be clear, I think that this is an incredible opportunity for the industry to rise to a different level of professionalism. I'm going to give you some interesting information on this because John knows something I've been pretty dear and working closely with. The average buyer in the United States thinks that agents 46% of the time spend less than 15 hours helping them buy a house. So everybody can let that sink in for a minute, okay? The actual amount of time an agent spends is between 80 to 100 hours working with a buyer. But see, all they think is that we just open doors, write an offer, and then get paid. It's ridiculous. But that's our fault because we don't go deep into this. And so I'm gonna kind of just lay out in 2 minutes just what we have to be thinking about as an industry. You would never go sit down with a seller and just put a listing agreement in front of them and just say sign. You're gonna do a presentation. You're gonna talk about value. You're going to talk about the services that you provide, professional photography, staging, whatever it is. You go through an entire presentation to show value. We don't do any of that on the buy side. And we need to be rethinking about it. Like, how do you approach sitting down with a buyer and going, here's what's in a transaction. Here's the work that's involved. Here's the details on how long it will take. Here's the amount of time it's going to take. And the last part, what are the products and services that we're offering buyers as part of the experience? Are we doing floor plans when the listing agent didn't do one? Are we doing virtual staging when the house looks like it's from the 1970s? What are the concierge services you're doing for changing utilities? What are you doing to help them own that asset? Is there a handyman you're providing with them, like the front door app? Like, we have to be thinking about this differently. And by the way, buyers will absolutely pay a premium for service and convenience. Every study I've done shows that they want representation, they want convenience, and they want service. It's our job to step up and do that. This is a huge opportunity for the industry to like really rise to this occasion. And I personally don't think you're going to see buyer representation go away at all. I think it's going to increase because we're going to learn how to show our value. So
you're completely right about that. And you know, at our company, we've had over 12,000 buyer agency and buyer contracts signed since 2018. And we've been teaching it for a long time, both nationally through Crush It Real Estate and my company. And, you know, the idea of sitting down with a buyer, going through a presentation, explaining what you do, explaining the process, explaining how fees are paid. This is not something new. Certainly not to agents at my company, but also truthfully, not to all agents at other companies. Generally speaking, there have been, to James's point, you know, maybe a higher percentage of people that got away from that, particularly since 2020, when it started to come down to what agent could run the fastest, and whatever agent could run the fastest once the COVID summer lifted for 3 years straight sold the most homes. Well, a lot of that stuff now you have to get back to preaching value, showing them what you're going to do. But consumers want it. I mean, think about it. Think about all the negative news with misinformation and straight lies that have been peddled by the plaintiffs' attorneys and a lot of the folks on the enemy side since last October, or really since last September, even before the case started. And even though that's happened, I don't know about you guys, but I still see buyers and sellers every day. Contact agent, contact agent, contact agent. Hasn't let up at all. People want to work with realtors, period.
Right.
They all, buyers want to, sellers want to. It's not stopping. It hasn't stopped. It's never going to stop. And to the industry disruptors out there who keep trying to stop it with tech, you're going to fail again. There's no question.
Well, with that, Leo, I see you wanted to get in on the conversation as well.
Yeah, so I literally just said this to a reporter, and I said we have a very clear analog with sellers because you know the headlines are like, oh, buyers are going to go away. No, they're not. Buyer's agent score. If you look at FSBO data, every year it's between 5 to 10% of homeowners end up choosing to go for sale by owner. And the range typically depends on whether we're in a low inventory environment or high inventory environment. Anthony and I met, 15 years ago doing REO, and there was a time where Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were giving out 5 and 6% buyer co-ops because there was just so much inventory to attract buyers and buyers agents. If you look at like to James' point, to do a buyer side representation, it takes 2 or 3 times the amount of effort that it does on the listing side. And we see sellers at about a 90%, right? People focus on the percentage of folks that choose to go physical. Look at the ones who choose a realtor, right? And it's typically a number that starts much higher than that, and 70, 80% of them at some point go, I tap out, let me go hire a professional to help me with this. My prediction is the same thing's gonna happen, right? I've been quoted calling it the messy middle because it's going to be confusing. Consumers and buyers, we're dealing with different information. A consumer is going to say, hey, that's not what my mom, my sister, my dad, my coworker told me the process like. So there's this adjustment period where we educate ourselves on the new normal. But I think that same percentage of humans who like to DIY like they do with the for sale by owner side are probably going to attempt it. And for every agent listening, try to schedule 10 showings in a 2-week period for you and your partner. And I think at a very high rate, equivalent to what we see on sellers or more, they're going to then lean on a professional. But that's where it comes what to James says, right? I actually have a t-shirt when I'm talking to my agents that say, treat your buyers like you treat your sellers.
Yeah.
First of all, assume it's going to now be competitive, just like any listing appointment you've gone on in the last 10 years. Let's be honest. What used to happen is you kind of bumped into somebody, and if you got along, you open a door for them, and you're kind of their agent until they bought with you or somebody else, or they stop calling you. Right now, there's going to be a presentation with a list of services in exchange for a fee that you agree upon with an expiration date. Right? It's going to imagine on the listing side just telling a seller, hey, when the contract shows up, we'll decide what you pay me, or expire when I'm done with you or you're done with me. That's how we did it on buyer agency. Right? Now it's going to have a start date, an end date, a fee. And you're going to be able to articulate what you're willing to do and not willing to do for that fee. Everyone has to take, like, again, this is a growth moment, and to upskill everybody and show the value, because I firmly believe most agents delivered a ton of value. But like James said, you didn't articulate it correctly. Like, one of my favorite scripts that, buyers agents should hear right now is, hey, I'm excited that you're qualified and we're going to start looking at homes. Just know that the home we'll totally write a contract on will probably be something you find on our portal, or one of your friends or family is going to send it to you. 80%, 90% of the value I bring to the table starts when we write the offer and get you close, right? It's those little things about articulating value, and James is working on some tech to be able to articulate that. I think there's going to be, a huge growth opportunity and opportunity for the professionals who are taking their game to the next level.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. With that, for 1 second here, this is a message to all of those that are tuned into today's webinar. I hope you're finding this intriguing, insightful, and hopefully educational. If you can only imagine, this is only 1 hour together with these incredible leaders. Please check your schedules. In September 4th to 6th, is our 36th annual RAS Media CEO and Leadership Exchange. It literally is 2.5 days with 400 plus incredible thought leaders in our industry getting together and talking about these issues and more that are affecting your opportunity to excel over the next 6 months and a year. There are tremendous opportunities ahead of us. You can't get them all in 1 hour on this webinar. I implore you to invest in your future. Take a look at the CEO and Leadership Exchange in September. Join us in Washington, D.C. You will not be discouraged. You'll be excited about the opportunities ahead of you. So thank you. I'll send you all a personal note on that. Now let's get back to our discussion. Leo, I think what you just said is absolutely correct. We're heading into a whole new era of opportunity. And what James is bringing out, and what Anthony is bringing out, and what Michelle for her own firm, the creation of new forms and education, is a whole new transformation of our industry. We have to excel at buyer representation. We have to be better at articulating our value and our skill sets and what it means to help the buyers obtain their goals and objectives as far as their real estate needs. For decades, we have focused on the listing side of the equation and helping our sellers optimize their value. We also have to do the same thing, and we have to do it individually and the creation of your own marketing and information tools. But also, James, tell us a little bit about what you're doing to help people on that side of the equation.
On the sell side, to be clear? Yeah. So look, to me, this is the scripting. It's not really scripting. The conversation starts with the seller. It's the listing agent sitting down with the seller and going, look, you probably read the headlines. You know, you're probably having questions about what we should do and whether we should advertise compensation. This is it. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, do you care about net? Is that what your biggest priority is? And they're going to go, yes. And you're going to go, great. So what we've done in our organization is we've told sellers this. What we're going to advertise is seller is willing to entertain any and all requests. Please put it in your offer. I'm telling you what our company's doing. Okay. We're doing that. It doesn't mean that our listing agents can't offer compensation. If that's a strategy they want to deploy, they're totally welcome to do so. But in our opinion, offering compensation in advance of an offer seems backwards, considering all of the buyer's agents now have had to sit down and do a buyer rep agreement. And those fees, as they always have, will vary. And so in our opinion, it's Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, just put whatever you need in the offer. And so here's a small anecdote to this. We're basically saying, look, we're willing to entertain anything. Just put in the offer what it is that you need, and then we'll entertain that. So I'm going to add a small piece of this because I had a conversation with an independent broker last week. I found this really fascinating. It'd be good for everybody to hear. He started doing this 6 months ago in Southern California. 6 listings over 6 months. Didn't advertise any compensation, just simply stated, put whatever request you have in the offer. He told me in every single scenario, that when the offer came across, there was a request for compensation in the offer. And in every single scenario, they negotiated it between the buyer's agent and them and the buyer and the seller paid it. In every single scenario. All 6 of those deals he did over 6 months in Southern California prior to August 17th, they did it this way because the point is sellers want to sell their house, buyers want to buy a house, it's a negotiation, everybody wants to make a deal come together, right? So for us, it's 2 things. Talking to the seller about the realities. It doesn't matter whether you want to offer or don't offer compensation. All we care about is the net proceeds. I want to get as many offers in. Whatever is requested, we'll negotiate that accordingly. And on the buy side, this is the last comment. We've told all of our agents, we don't care what the seller's agent is doing or not doing. I don't care if the house is said sold as is, means nothing to us. All we're going to do is on any single property that is for sale, we're going to meet with the buyer, figure out what they need to put a deal together, put it in the offer and send it across. If the buyer wants the helicopter that the seller isn't selling, we're putting it in the offer anyway, right? So to me, this is so basic. Just sellers willing to entertain anything, buyer's agent put whatever the hell you need in the contract, and it becomes a negotiation. And proven by all of the conversations I'm having with brokers who've been doing this, are like, yeah, the seller does whatever it takes to get the deal done because they want to sell their house because they have a reason to sell the house, and the buyer puts it in there because they need to buy it under certain terms. The end.
Yeah, and John, just to piggyback on that too. So I think one thing that we're going to be competing a lot on isn't just the buyer presentation, but the actual buyer representation agreement itself.
Yeah.
You know, so like I said, I learned everything I learned from my agents and my teams. They bought me these amazing consumer friendly, spelling out what they're going to do buyer agreements. You know, so you can go into a buyer and get them to sign an agreement that's all CYA, 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 and a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo. It's not going to turn anybody on. or you can go to them with these are all the things. I'm going to handle your paperwork. I'm going to get you a dog sitter. I'm going to, knock on doors if I can't find you a house that's on the market. I'm going to do all these things for you. And in exchange, this is what I expect to get paid. Like a buyer rep agreement. And I think your agents or us as brokerages to come up with something, and we already have, we put it out there, that, this is a consumer friendly, this is all the things I'm going to do for you. When you're competing on that level with something that is going to turn people on and think, oh, I need somebody to do this for me, then you're going to win, not just on your presentation, but you're going to win on your agreement too.
And Michelle, you're also promoting full transparency to your client. You're working on their behalf and you're spelling out exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to be compensated for that. And to James's point, okay, this new normal is literally the seller wants to do what the seller has to do in order to achieve their goals and objectives, to sell and get the highest. If it's timing, to get it on the quickest time frame. If it's to receive the highest net proceeds, it's the highest net, whatever their goals and objectives are. This, on the buyer side, is where we're really becoming much more sophisticated and explaining our value to our buy side clients and letting them know I'm going to do this for you, A, B, C, D, E, negotiating on all of these different fronts. And with that, I'm going to be paid X for doing that if I help you accomplish the mission. Now with that, I saw Anthony, you were flagging me down there for a second.
Yeah, I'm not shy on these subjects, as you know, and the strategy that James talked about is certainly one of those options that the sellers have, is to not proactively offer anything. And the other option the seller has is to proactively offer something if they would like to. And that's really the decision of the seller. And, last week I lost my voice for 4 days, which, I mean, my family and the executives around me were pretty happy. But I lost my voice because I spent the whole day last Thursday filming our new Crush It in Real Estate, Getting Paid the New Way in Real Estate course that'll be released later this week. And I went over that. There are different options, and the market that you are in will also dictate how aggressive a seller should be. Leo alluded to a time that him and I met when one of the banks was offering lots of compensation. I mean, the way I view it is it's really up to the client whether they want to proactively offer it or not, and how much the buyer is going to be in agreement to pay their agent is really a negotiation between them as well. Now, the funny thing about compensation, I remember when I first got in the business, my first broker owner I ever had, I started out at Remax 20 years ago last month, and he used to say, who pays the commission? And half the room would say, the seller. And then the other half would go, well, the buyer. Well, it's kind of funny because what James pointed out is right. We're already seeing that in New Hampshire where, buyer can pay directly, buyer could negotiate part of it in a closing cost credit or seller concession. Or they could request that seller pay it. All these options are available everywhere. Most cases, sellers are saying, no problem. We'll accept your offer and we'll agree to pay X, right? But the funny part of the story is, and I would have loved to have said it in the courtroom in Missouri had I been in there, when they say, why is the seller paying the buyer brokerage fee? Well, are they? Who brings the money to the table? Who brings the money to the table when a transaction ends, right? Or when a transaction closes? So there's certainly argument to go around, but all of those strategies are ones that should be, discussed with sellers, discussed with buyers, for them to make a decision on what they want to do. I will say to the agents out there watching, and I know there'll be a lot of you who may be intimidated of obtaining some sort of written agreement. Remember, the rule in the settlement doesn't say buyer agency agreement or buyer contract for those non-fiduciary states. What it says is written agreement. So it even could be a showing agreement. So those of you that are nervous, don't be. I mean, there's like 17 states, Connecticut and New Hampshire. They're both, it's the law in the state to obtain a buyer agency agreement before you go out showing homes. And this isn't going to be difficult. And now that everyone is going to be doing it and buyers are going to be hearing it everywhere they go, it's going to be even easier. So this isn't something that people should be stressed out about or nervous about.
Hey, John, one comment so everybody hears this. Like at some point, I believe because currently right now there was prior to all of this 16 states across the US mandated a buyer rep agreement already. Michelle's comments like dead accurate. There's going to be a lot of competition in that, and on the other side of that is a lot of confusion, because unfortunately there's going to be forms that are not pro-consumer, that are going to be not clear on what it is. I personally think long term you'll see state mandated buyer rep agreements, just like multiple states have done, where it's just one form required by the state that everybody follows. I'm not saying I'm endorsing that. I'm just saying I think there's going to be a lot of confusion, a lot of forms that are not pro-consumer, and unfortunately the states and or the Department of Justice, because our industry never learns half the time, will intervene in order to create something more standardized. By the way, if you want to know a state that does it really well, you got to give props to Washington. They were ahead of it from MLS decoupling. They were ahead of it with a mandatory buyer rep agreement at the state level that the Attorney General was involved in helping draft. It's 3 pages, extraordinarily clear, the end. Like, there's movement in the right direction, but Michelle's 100% dead on accurate that there's going to be a competition for, you know, what this agent's offering versus another in those contracts up front. And Leo's comment is also, you know, you're competing on the list side, you're now going to compete for representation on the buy side. Buyers will interview multiple agents at some point. So,
well, and there already was a lot of competition, but now that they're having to discuss fees and force a lot of those things up front, it might create more of it on the front end, and that's okay. And another thing that I'll mention about Washington State, you look at the Pacific Northwest MLS, they, like my biggest MLS PIN, are saying, hey, we're still allowing the option for broker to brokerage compensation offerings. And I just want to mention here in this webinar that, you know, just by us saying, hey, we're not going to do that and we're not going to be posting it, don't take that as me saying those who are dead wrong. That's their choice. I don't agree with it. I think you're safer for your company. I think you're safer operating day to day as a realtor. If you're not participating in the sharing of compensation, you know, I was on stage with James at another event in Arizona a few months ago, and James very well said, he very correctly said, hey guys, remember, sharing of compensation is how we get into this thing. So just because the NAR settlement doesn't limit you from doing that doesn't mean that you still should. And I want to point that out. And then the other thing I want to quote James on is he posted my video where I did the whiteboard. Everybody seemed to get it when I did the whiteboard. I wish I did it 3 weeks ago. I would have saved us all a lot of havoc. But when James posted that on his LinkedIn and his Facebook, he said, Anthony is talking about the rerouting of compensation. And I know you got into that earlier, and I just wanted to mention again because I thought that was a good way to phrase it.
If I could, you're all, I think, doing a fabulous job, not just educating and leading your respective firms, but also advising and giving counsel, not legal counsel, but counsel across our industry, which I think is very important. And I think, James, one of the comments you made just a few minutes ago is so true. We're going to see, I believe we're going to see state mandated forms. They're coming. It has to happen.
But I worry what they'll put out though, because a lot of the association forms that I've seen in states that we operate in and others, I've looked at them and I don't feel they're good forms. And some of them, I have to say, they're terribly consumer unfriendly.
I don't disagree. I agree with you but it's a matter of control. They want to control what we do. Okay.
It's gonna be messy getting there, John. Anthony's not wrong, but
yeah.
I do think that's where we'll end up. So
yeah. I think both of you are.
John, I think the last thing I want to hear from the government is I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Like, that's the last thing we want to hear. So let's do it right ourselves.
Michelle, I'm on the same page.
Involved in our business.
I'm just stating what I think is going to happen. I'm not advocating.
Those
that's coming from
seven fabulous words. That's right. Those seven fabulous, I think it's 7 fabulous words brought to us by President Reagan there. I think it was Michelle. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Okay. But aside from that, I think it's very important what you're bringing out is, I believe, education, continual education of what's happening in your respective marketplaces, more focus groups with your agents as to what is working, what success they're getting as they are utilizing your forms, Michelle, for example, or anything else. Continual education so that they're protecting themselves and your organizations. Leo, you have 73,000 agents throughout the United States. They're not going to stay with EXP if they're not seeing value from the organization and leadership. Okay, and part of that is training and forms that they can use successfully and not worry about being in a legal quagmire.
Yeah, no, I hope to not be in the form business forever, but I got the feeling we're going to be in it for a while. And, the only positive unintended consequence of all of the misinformation is my agents paid attention and got well versed. And I had a couple association leaders call me and say, your agents are more well scripted in this than my staff.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, mine and Anthony's agents got quite ridiculed over the last couple of weeks on social media, but what it forced them to do was become very well versed in it. And I actually had agents say, I got a call from someone screaming, and by the end of the call, they were very grateful. To your point, John, we actually open sourced all of our documents, gave them away. So any independent broker or franchise there listening and is worried, our seller toolkit and our buyer toolkit is completely open source. I gave it all away because this is a moment to help the industry move forward, not be tribal at all.
Well, you've all of you have, and that's one of the things I'm extremely proud to call all of you my friends, is you have been open and honest with your industry. Okay. Now with that, you have a lot of discussion that's taking place. There's 1.5 million members of the National Association of Realtors, and you constantly are hearing, oh my gosh, that membership's going to fall through the roof. Well, I don't know where that membership will end up. It may stay at 1.5 million because some members find value without doing any transactions. However, whatever the number is, NAR serves a purpose, okay? And it has to serve a better purpose for every one of its members, in my opinion. However, when you look at our industry and the service that we provide our buyers and our sellers and the investor community, there's no better industry than ours in providing quality service and skills for our customers. It's how we articulate it is the difference. How we articulate and explain our value, and then not just define our value, but deliver our value is what's more important. James, when you go around and you're talking to all sorts of individuals throughout the industry, where do you see the shortcomings? What can brokerage firms do better for their agents, in your opinion?
Well, look, I mean, I'm going to boil this down to the following. I don't think agents, if agents were to sit down and actually pay attention and, for example, track what they actually do, they would have a completely different viewpoint on their value. And I think it's important that, let me reverse into this. We've been taught for a long time to shelter our clients from all the minutia that goes on. I believe that day needs to stop, and it needed to stop a long time ago. I think that our job is to show them how much work is actually going into helping them buy or sell a house. For example, if you think about an agent, when you are going to show a property, you're going to set up an appointment with the listing agent, make a phone call, potentially have a conversation, drive to the property, go on location, talk to the buyer, show them the property, sit in the driveway, have a conversation, call the listing agent, ask additional questions, get a copy of the disclosure package, read the disclosure package, go through that disclosure package, send an email to the buyer, and you just spent 2 to 3 hours of your time on one property. By the way, the buyer only saw the 30 minutes you were at the show. We have to rethink everything. And I want to thank all the plaintiffs' lawyers for this, because really what you've taught us is we're going to now show everything that we do, just like you do. The difference is we're not going to charge 10 times as much money like the lawyers do. So I think the point here is we have to just take everything that we've learned and go the opposite way. I want to bring the client into the experience. I want them to see everything that's going on, because when you do that, the buyer and the agent and the seller go, oh my God, I had no idea all that work was going on. I think it's our responsibility as companies to retrain our workforce. I also think it's a responsibility to set a minimum standard. I know it sounds crazy with everybody's independent contractor. I'm talking about your brokerage having a minimum standard of what you provide to buyers and sellers. I think this is a huge, huge opportunity for everyone to shift the way we've done things and look at the opportunity ahead. I'm going to give you one additional stat because I'm a total numbers guy and I love this stuff. In 1960, dual income households were around 30% in America, okay? Today, it's almost 60%. And what I mean by that is in order to live in this expensive country, which we all know, you actually have to have two incomes to do anything. So to Leo's comment earlier, people don't wake up and just go, oh, I'm gonna go buy a house on my own because I have all that free time. Like my wife and I both have careers. I've got a 3-year-old terrorist at home. So like the reality is we need somebody to help us through that process. We're gonna question the value if you can't explain what you do. But if we can show them what we do, everyone's willing to pay a premium on that. So brokerages need to do this. Sit down and go through every single detail about what we're doing on the list side and how we present our value to sellers, both sides, and the same thing for buyers. Just literally go through every single detail. If you don't know what your buyer or seller wants, ask them. It's not complicated. Just literally do a survey. A perfect example, John, it drives me absolutely nuts. 30% of listings in the United States have a floor plan. What's the second most requested thing by buyers? Floor plans.
Floor plan.
You can literally go get a floor plan created for free by using Kubicasa. It takes 5 minutes for the agent to do it, but we're not doing that. So as an example, in our organization, we're setting this. We're gonna go, floor plans are a minimum thing to do on every listing, period, end of story. Why? Because your seller will appreciate it and so will the buyer. Like if we wanna make changes, we have to start living bold and making those. And I wanna give Leo credit for something because look, he's in a different league than the others here. No offense to any of us, but when you have that many agents and going out publicly and making that statement, he's going to take a lot of shots. People are going to try and recruit his people. They're going to twist his words, all of that stuff. But what I appreciate about the fact that he's doing that is he's saying, we're going here. This is where it's going to be. And we're going to take our people there. And the reality is everyone else is going to follow suit anyway. So as an industry, raising that bar is huge. The fact that he shared his forums and all of that stuff benefits the entire industry as a whole. This is a shining opportunity, man, for everybody to level up your game and do a better job. And again, final comment, buyers and sellers are willing to pay a premium for convenience and service. We just have to show it to them.
Thanks, James. Anthony, your thoughts, final thoughts here.
My thoughts are it's going to be a bumpy 6 months in the industry. I'm happy that it's in the second part of the year, which is historically slower. And, you know, people are going to have some patience, work together. One of the videos that I did a few weeks ago was simply on, hey, let's work together. Okay, I remember in August and September of 2008, when banks were going under left and right and buyers were past their mortgage contingency date. Imagine being a 25-year-old buyer. Your mortgage contingency date lapses. You're supposed to close the next day, and the mortgage company that you're going to goes bankrupt. And you know what happened? Within a couple of weeks, buyers and sellers were communicating, obviously through their agents. Sellers were saying, okay, fine, you need 30 extra days, and they worked together for the greater good, and they sold the home without taking people's deposits. When COVID first hit, there were all kinds of mandates about going into homes and things like that. Realtors came together, talked, figure out ways to decrease the amount of people getting into homes. This year, I hope and I predict, will be the third time in my 20-year career that we see realtors put their pride aside, put their competitive nature aside, and just talk with one another. Okay, this is the form you're sending me. I'm a little bit confused by it. Explain it to me. Why do you need this form? Okay, let me go talk to my seller about this. And the same thing in reverse. When you're representing a buyer, if a listing agent is confused by a form of yours, relax. In all of our buy-side transactions, we're going to have the language in the buyer purchase agreement and an accompanying compensation form for parties to sign. If someone sees that and there's something they don't like, talk, be open. Don't scream at each other. Don't grandstand. I mean, it's amazing how some people get, but what I have found those last two times, 08 and during COVID, is when the going got hot, people did chill, realtors did chill and say, hey, let's work together. Let's remember that our job is to do things for the greater good of the buyers and sellers, and I hope that we see that happen here. I'll tell you one peripheral benefit to me. I've never had so many EXP fans in my life. I mean, I came out swinging. I came out swinging about no broker to broker, and Leo did, and Leo started taking more hours than me. And all of a sudden, all these EXP agents are following me, and they're saying, I love that Anthony's saying this too. So, hey, I appreciate that. And you know, the industry is going to get through this. The broker business is going nowhere. The idea that these disruptors have where they want to destroy our business, they think that people don't need a realtor. They're going to be wrong once again.
Let's go to Michelle. Thank you, Anthony. Very well said. Michelle, final thoughts.
I think we need to be loud and vocal. I think the agents need to tell their brokers what they need. This is what I need from you. And then we need to tell our associations what we need. We need to make sure that they understand they're run by staff people and some electeds, and they don't know, they're not with their boots on the ground like we are. We need to be vocal and tell our brokers what we need from them, tell our industry and the leaders what we need from them, tell our associations what we want to see. This is our industry. This is our industry. We need to take it back. We need to control it. We need to get the government the freak out of it, and let's take control of our industry again.
Boy, you know what? When a U.S. Marine says we need to put boots on the ground, you better listen, okay? And you know what, Michelle? What you're doing, not just for your firm, but throughout Southern California, is terrific. Keep up that enthusiasm and the integrity. Leo, your final thoughts. Well,
So I just got quoted this morning, and can you hear me?
yeah, now we can.
Can you hear me? Did you lose? Okay. I said, I just got quoted in CNN this morning, and my quote is, "This is a grand social experiment at scale in the real estate industry." Let's brace for the confusion. Let's expect there to be confusion, not only on the agent side, but have grace for the consumers. There are going to be buyers who call you and say, I don't want to sign anything. Don't be disrespectful. They are learning with us. This has never happened. And again, Anthony nailed it. Grace and respect, we're on this together, and this too shall pass is the last word I'll say.
Well, that's fantastic. If I could, first of all, I want to thank all four of you for being part of this, because this is not a crisis, this is an opportunity. There's no doubt in my mind, this is an opportunity. I've been so fortunate to be around this industry since 1977. I've seen many challenges come and go, and many opportunities come. This is an opportunity, but it takes education. Education is always intertwined with opportunity. And each one of you, the reasons why I asked each one of you to be on this panel is because you're not shy about educating those that are in and around you with your insights and your professionalism to help them be better. And that's what we want. Now, we're going into an interesting time here. Interest rates are down a little bit. The 10-year, every time the 10-year Treasury note goes down, then mortgage rates go down. We're going to see some new opportunities, I believe, coming if there's a Fed cut rate in September. It might help us end this year a little stronger as far as transactions are concerned. But more importantly, it's the new normal that we're all in right now. I think a couple of you mentioned it. Professional courtesy is what we need to make sure happens in our industry. We need to be talking amongst ourselves. As Michelle said, we create this industry. We're making this industry happen. And if we do it with the utmost courtesy and integrity and transparency, we will succeed. I'd like to thank all four of you for being part of this. I look forward to seeing hundreds of you that are tuned in right now in September in Washington, D.C. And if you come to the CEO Exchange in September, I personally will welcome you on a boat ride on the Potomac River to network with 400 of the most incredible people running and leading our industry into the future. So from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to thank Leo, James, Anthony, and Michelle for being part of this. And please keep it up. Take us to new heights in this industry. Thank you very much for being part of this RAS Media webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.